I'm going to try my hardest to do a fairly quick run through of this case, but it's, as they always are, fairly convoluted and lots of little things go on. I'm going to look at a map, some charts, and this timeline here. Okay, Andrea Knabel lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and on the 13th of August this year she just vanished. She is a member of Missing in America who looks for missing people herself. She has 2 children. As far as we know, as far as I know, a pretty normal life, and she's just vanished. Now, initially we were just given a time of, we were told that she was at her sister's house at about 1:30 in the morning, and that was it. So I did a chart for then, did a map based off that, and I'm going to cut to the chase. This is what the chart says. It's not my opinion. The chart showed me that there was something around the sister and a sister's boyfriend. I didn't know anything about Andrea's family, but found out she did have a sister. Then have recently learnt that she had another sister. Now, I'm not going to name names, but regardless, the first chart did show that a sister was involved somehow, not saying involved in a bad way, but knows something. And then when we were given this timeline here, it shows that that's the case. So on the 12th at 9 o'clock, she left her mum's house. Now she went to her mum's house. Her mum's house was being renovated. Her mum wasn't living there at the time. Now, I don't know the reasoning why she went to her mum's house and things like that, but that's what happened. So that's at 9:01. Within 6 minutes, she is at McDonald's on Poplar Road in Louisville. Then within 37 minutes at 9:40, she leaves McDonald's with her sister's boyfriend and her nephew, and a nephew. Within 10 minutes at 9:50, she's in the medical centre. From what I hear is apparently an infection or something wrong with her face. 11:22, she leaves the medical centre, so she's there for nearly a couple of hours. And by all accounts, she leaves the medical centre in an Uber or a Lyft, which leads me to wonder who took her to the hospital and why did she have to get a lift home. Anyway, at 11:34, she arrived back at her mum's house again. At midnight, she walked over about 400 metres or so to one of her sister's house. Stayed there for about an hour and a half and then was asked to leave. She then arrived back at her mum's house again at 1:54 a.m. But this time, apparently, her sister and her sister's boyfriend and this nephew was actually locking her out of the house. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense. I don't really know where they were in this period here. All of a sudden now they're locking her out of her house. 3:53, her phone is still active at her mum's house. 6:31 a.m. in the morning on the 13th, it's still active at her mum's house, and then it's gone and she's gone. So it appears like her phone was at her mum's house from 1:54, but at 1:54 she wasn't able to get in the door of her mum's house, and her family were behind the other side of the door. So one would have to believe that those people need questioning, and one would hope that they have been questioned. Okay, so let's just move along to a couple of the charts. Okay, so this is the chart for 11:22. It's just out of sight, I do apologise. 11:22, and it's an event chart, but I'm curious as to what happened after Andrea left the hospital. Why she left in a lift instead of with the people she was with, and also why was she there in the first place. I can look at a different chart to see why she was there, look at the earlier chart obviously, but I think this is going to give us some indication anyway. as always, oops, a bug on me, sorry. As always, we always look for the moon to see the victim and the ascendant as well. But because I'm using a few charts, I'm going to focus mainly on the moon. Now the moon's at 23 Capricorn, and being towards the end of the sign, we need to see if it's void. Is it going to make any aspects to any other planets before it moves to Aquarius? Well, it's not going to make any major aspects, but when it gets to 26 degrees, it is going to quincunx Mars exactly. So I think it's important that we note that the movement of the moon is going to trigger off that angry, aggressive, nasty old Mars, which we also have a yod pointing down here as well. Let's keep that in mind. So the moon's our timing. Anyway, what happened to Andrea after the hospital? So she leaves the hospital, which is the 12th house. Neptune belongs in the 12th house and rules all things hospitals. So we can see, okay, she's walking out of the hospital. It's so far back into the 12th house and behind Chiron that it's almost as if she shouldn't have been let out of that hospital. There's a trine, just a 1 degree trine to the north node there on the 4th house cusp, the end of the matter, which is showing sort of the ease of how she's able to leave this hospital. But then there's a square here from Jupiter in the 8th house, which is generally where we're going to be looking, because we don't know if she's alive or not as well. That's showing that, perhaps if she had have remained in there a little bit longer, then something may not have happened to her. I mean, we don't know if something has happened untoward, or whether something's happened accidentally due to whatever it is that took her into hospital. Anyway, so let's assume Andrea's walked out of the hospital. Let's see Andrea as the ruler of Aries. So where's Mars? As I was speaking before about, Mars is that 26 degree Leo, so it's aspecting the moon. So there's Andrea. Now, it's in the 5th house, which leads me to believe that Andrea actually wants to continue to do what she's doing. So if she's partying or doing drugs or drink or something like that, she wants to continue doing that. The moon is in the 10th house, which is opposite the house, the 4th, which is the home. She wants to be far away from the home. So I don't think she really wanted to go home, but her home wasn't very far away. So I want to look at the 3rd house cusp, and that's ruled by Gemini. And Gemini is Mercury, and Mercury is sitting in the 4th house. So when I think of her family that took her to the hospital, they're now back at home just waiting for her. Or did they take her home? Did the lift driver definitely take her home from the hospital? I think he did, but more to the point, why is the family waiting at the house when Andrea is at the hospital? Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Okay, so the open enemy area is the 7th house. That is ruled by Libra, which is Venus. Venus is a female. At 19 degrees Taurus, it is nearly conjunct the Sun, which is a male, which is a bit of an older male, at 20 degrees in the 5th house. The party people, the people she was with. And then sorry about that. So there's like Andrea, the boyfriend, the sister, and the nephew trailing behind, or the nephew's at home. So did they drop the nephew at home and then they've gone out to go and get themselves some drugs, drink, something like that? The 5th house is partying. So have they left the nephew at home while they've gone off to do something, while Andrea's finding her own way home? that's definitely a possibility. Let's move forward. Just excuse me going out of here. I'm going to put up, this is 3:53 a.m. Now, so we've gone forward a fair few hours. On the timeline, this was the point where she'd been locked out of the house by her family, and her phone was still active, but there was really no activity where she was concerned. Now look, we can see the moon has now moved to 26 degrees. It is exactly quincunx that Mars. It's in the 7th house, which is not a good place to be. It's in its detriment in Capricorn. It's conjunct Pluto and Saturn. The ruler of the open enemy here is Saturn, which is death, basically. And Venus is now at 20 degrees conjunct that Sun. So the female and the male have come together even closer to ensure whatever's going on is happening correctly. As we can see, we've got a yod that's moving around as we look at the charts. This yod is now pointing to the 2nd and 3rd house, which leads me to believe that I can't help but see this as people that could be involved, and Andrea being here, being not in a good way, or not even alive at this point, unfortunately. And the people that are involved are actually trying to think of how they're going to preserve themselves in this situation, in this chart. It's not very good to look at at all, actually. Cancer ruling. We can't use Andrea, excuse me, as Cancer here, because really we just know that this is a point in time, but even though we can't, Andrea is still ruled by the moon. The fact that the moon has made that perfect quincunx, which means an adjustment between the two, yeah, it's not good at this point. What I'm interested in is looking a little bit earlier, though, actually, to see the state of Andrea's health. So I will bring up this is 1:54. So this is when she tried to get back into the house but wasn't allowed in. And it looks even worse. Yeah, as I imagined. Now the moon, Pluto, Saturn and the part of fortune are all in the 8th house of death. The family here are in the 3rd house of family. There's the nephew, siblings, there's a sister. They're literally standing at the door, not letting her in. It's like the man's there, then the sister's there, then the nephew's behind going, wondering what's going on, perhaps. It's literally, the IC is the door of the home, and they are standing up against it. And Andrea was Mars in that last chart, and now she's on the other side of the door. It doesn't look very... As I said, we've seen this yod move around. So it's a pointy line here from Neptune to Pluto and the moon. Moon's a bit wide, but still. So it's Pluto, Neptune, pointing down to Venus and the Sun and the IC here. So now the situation's like... See, the fact that the moon, which is Andrea, and Neptune are involved and in aspect, it's showing me that there's alcohol or drugs involved here, probably drugs. So there's a drug situation pointing down to the people that were there, and Mars, which is anger. I feel like, and I'm not victim blaming at all, but this is just the perception that I get of Andrea from the chart, is that she was really wired, and Mars gives us this really fast energy that can sometimes be an annoying energy. It feels as though perhaps she was being a bit over the top with different things, and whether that was because she was having some sort of mental break or something was going wrong, which is absolutely possible. So I'm not saying it's her fault, she was just being silly or whatever, but it could have been that she was hard to handle that night, and that perhaps locking her out of the house, they felt as though that was the only thing they could do to get rid of her because she was being so annoying. Now, the worst side of me, and the thing that I see often, is that when I see something like this and then someone goes missing, one has to assume that perhaps the person has annoyed them to the point where they've hurt them. Now, was this perhaps an accident? Nothing really looks like an accident here, except I can't lie and say that I can't not notice that Uranus at 6 degrees is forming a wide square, but nonetheless still a square to Mercury, which is a nephew, which is, unusually there was a nephew there, and Mercury represents a nephew. It is possible that something happened with him and Andrea, an accidental injury to the head, and I'm saying head because Mars is very involved here. The ruler of the 6th house of health in this chart is Mars as well. So it's showing me, she not only went into hospital because of her head or face, and I'd say it was face, and I feel as though it was drug related, unfortunately, but I think something perhaps afterwards happened to her head as well. Maybe there's a head injury that's occurred. And the nephew, if this is the nephew, if we can represent that as, we will represent it as a nephew or a sibling, that is in aspect to Uranus, and that can be sudden accidents or sudden occurrences that we don't want to happen. Now, there's another chart that we'll just have a look at quickly, and that is, this is the very last time, 6:31. Now we have Venus and the Sun at 20 degrees, along with Mars in the 1st house, showing us that these people are in the forefront of the situation right now, trying to sort something out. Mercury here is in the 12th house, hiding. He's in the background. It's very possible that these people were covering up something for this person in the 12th house here. Could have been that something, covering up for something that happened when they were going to the hospital. There's that 12th house there. This shows Andrea in the 6th house, next to Pluto of health, which is very detrimental. It's showing me that her health is not good at this point, or she's no longer around at this point. The end of the matter is now ruled by Mars, which is in the 1st house. It just doesn't look good at all. But what I intend to do is stick around this 20 for the mileage, for distance, and Saturn to the Moon and this Capricorn area for direction, because there's too many charts to do all the directions. So I'm pointing in the direction of what's going on, and it's pointing now to these two taking lead. And so at this point, when I believe that somebody is deceased, we need to look at Saturn, because Saturn is the body, and that shows us where the body can be. There are a few areas we can look, but I'm very inclined to look at Saturn here, especially because of this 14, 14, and now the ascendant's 14. It's very repetitive, this 14. Yeah, I don't think she's run away. You know, I don't think she's left of her own accord. It shows that her health is in a bad way. Yeah, sadly, I think she has deceased. Now, I'm going to look at the map, and I'll show you here, what I'm going to map is 14 Capricorn to 27 Capricorn. All of these planets, because that's the body and that's Andrea and that's death basically. So let's do this whole area. Okay. Oh, I've got a silly line on there. Need to take that away. Okay. So I've drawn this in before. This bottom line here is where, sorry, I could hear something, is where the moon is, and this top line here is where Saturn is. And it goes behind Chickadee Road. And amazingly, I've done a map for this before, and even though it was a completely different chart, it went to exactly the same area, 21 miles, sorry. It goes to the University of Louisville, and this wedge here is the place that needs to be looked. And I mean really looked. When we zoom in and have a look here, there's houses there and whatnot, but there's areas of land here with trees that should be looked at here. This body of water definitely should be looked at. Anything that is between these two lines that represents the moon and Saturn in those charts is where I'd be looking. All the way out to the university, empty building sites, if there is one like this again, construction areas, again, just little areas like this where there's trees. She could just be along the edge of a road. So just very quickly, that is the area. I could do more. Her other sister lives here. The hospital she went to is up here, which is weird because it's actually further away than the one here. But basically, I don't see any point in doing any other lines when those are so specific and they've come up twice. So again, that would be the area that I'd be looking all the way to the university. Okay, thank you guys.